Isn't water delicious? It's one of the things we need to live, so I guess it's a good thing we enjoy it, right? Welcome back to the EEI online lessons. Again, I am Miss Latimer, and today I'm here to talk to you guys more about water. So, last time in our video, we discussed about how much water we have. We have about 71% of our planet, right? 71% of our Earth is water. All of that blue. We also talked about the fact that most of it is salt water. So today, we're going to talk about that a little bit more and kind of clarify, and we're also going to talk a little bit about the water cycle, how all that water moves. So, one thing you're going to want, on our page underneath our video, you're going to find a link to this graph right here. We're going to graph all of the different types of water, all that salt water and fresh water we talked about last time. We're going to put that on a graph so we can see exactly how much we have. So if you don't have that, you might want to pause your video, go get that graph real quick, okay? And then once you have it, resume. Are we ready? So, with a good graph, the first thing we're going to need is a title. Okay, the title for this one is going to be types of water. I wrote mine in marker. You can use a pen or pencil if you like. All right, so at the very top, we're going to write types of water. Now, we talked about two big types. We talked about salt water. Remember most of it, the big giant, right? Most of it is salt water and just a little bit is fresh. But the cool thing is there are actually two different classifications for that fresh water that we're going to talk about today. Okay, the fresh water we talked about last time, we looked at some of the lakes on our Earth. Okay, they look very small compared to the ocean, but they'd be big even if we were there, right? So we're going to graph that to get a better picture. The other type we didn't really focus a whole lot on was the ice. Okay, not the ice like we use in our cups, right? The ice in here, no, that we make from the fresh water in our homes. But this ice, the glaciers, the icebergs, where the polar bears live and some of the penguins and the seals, right? That ice counts a little bit differently because we don't have access to it. Now, what we're going to do in our graph, the first thing, we've got our title up here, is we need to know how many squares we have before we begin. So we're going to count. So we're going to count down. You can count with me. You can watch me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Each column has 10. So I'm going to count by 10s to see how many we have total. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. So we have 100 squares. We're going to put all of those water, all that salt water, the fresh water, and the ice on our graph. Now the first one we're going to look at is one we use. And it has to be out of 100 squares. If we use fresh water, how many of those squares do you think are fresh water? Remember what we talked about last time? It's just a tiny bit, right? Out of 100, it's only one square. Out of all of those 100 squares, only one square is the fresh water we can use, because that's 1% of our water. So on your graph, what I want you to do is pick one color for fresh water. I picked blue for mine. You're going to color one square with blue, and that's going to be the fresh water that we can use. Okay, so just one square for that 1%. 1 out of 100 is fresh water. And then remember that other type of fresh water, the one that's frozen, where the penguins and the polar bears live, right? The ice. We have a tiny bit more, okay? We have 2 squares out of our 100 squares that are ice. Now, if we add those up, we get 3 squares, right? So you're going to count 2 squares for ice. I chose to color my ice first orange. Okay, so 2 squares, 1 and 2 are orange, and 1 is blue. Now, technically, all these are fresh, so you sometimes will hear we have 3% fresh water. That's because the 1% we can drink and the ice are included. All right, but we're going to count them separately so we can see just 1 square is our fresh water we use, and 2 squares are the ice at the glaciers, right? The north and the south of our planet. That leaves all these squares, and only the other one type of water we discussed, right? Salt water. Guys, about 97% of our water, or 97 out of our 100 squares, is salt water. Okay, so we're going to color those a different color. For mine, I chose green. So I'm going to color those 97 squares, and it should look something like this. So we have 1 square for our fresh water, 2 for our ice, and 97 squares for salt water. That's a lot, right? So, cool thing about graphs, they depict a lot of information. We have a title, just like in a book, a title tells us what it's about. So we're graphing these different types of water. But if someone were to look at my graph right now, they'd say, I've never seen orange water before. So what we need is a key. Underneath, we're gonna label our 3 types. I drew 3 squares. I colored 1 blue, 1 orange, and 1 green. And then I wrote which was which. So my blue was fresh water, my orange was ice, and my green was salt water. So underneath all my squares at the very, very bottom, I wrote those. So you can see, fresh water is 1 out of 100, or 1%. Ice was 2 out of 100, it's orange, it was 2%. And then my green square is my salt water, which was 97 out of 100 squares, or 97% of the water on our planet. So when we look at this graph, this 1% right here, that's crazy. Who needs fresh water? We do, right? We talked about that. But also our pets, our plants, we all need access to fresh water. What are we going to do about that? Right? We'll come back to that. Because the other thing I want to show you is all these waters that we have, all these different types of water, they all move around our planet. When you go outside and you see a puddle after it rains, it goes away, right? Where does it go? Some of it soaks into the ground, but what if it's on the concrete? It evaporates. Really cool. We're going to talk about this water cycle. I'm going to tell you before we even get started, I learned about the water cycle in elementary school. I learned it in middle school. I learned it in high school. I even learned it in college. The water cycle is very important. It talks about how our water moves. Okay, what happens is the water is in all of these places on our planet. When the sun comes out and heats up the water, it turns into gas and it evaporates. It moves up towards the sky. So if you look at this up here, I have my water on the bottom. Okay, that water, when that sun is nice and hot, it evaporates the water. It moves it up. It's called evaporation. When it turns into gas and moves up to the sky, okay, and it keeps going and going. And when it gets up high enough, it cools down and all those water droplets, all those pieces come together and they condense. Okay, we have condensation. That's where we get our clouds. So we have evaporation, comes up here. We have condensation. And then, everyone knows this part, when those clouds get heavy, what happens? It rains. Here in Texas, we usually get rain. Sometimes we get hail or ice, right? And if we're really lucky, sometimes we get snow. All of those things that come down are called precipitation. So we're going to write that up here. Precipitation. So when it comes back down, okay? This is happening all the time, over and over and over. All of that energy from the sun lifts it up, it cools down, turns into clouds, and it comes back down. Now, those words, evaporation, condensation, and precipitation, those are pretty important. You'll learn those over and over again, just like I did, okay? And what we're going to do a couple of things to help you remember it. Because if you're anything like me, if you remember from the last video, I tend to forget things. So what we're going to do, we're going to sing a song to help us remember. And we're going to make a bracelet, all right? Now, before we start our bracelet, I'm going to sing the song for you. It's just these 3 steps. It's a quick song to help me remember what I'm doing. And then as we build our bracelet, we'll get to talk about each of those steps again. So when the sun comes out, if my water is right here in a puddle, when that sun comes out, it's going to evaporate, right? It's going to go way up to the sky. So the first part of our song is evaporation, okay? Then, when it gets up there, what does it do? It makes a cloud. So I'm going to make a big cloud. That part's called condensation. Then when those clouds get heavy, what happens? It rains, right? Precipitation falling down. Now, so remember what it's called? That's what's called the water cycle. And so I have to remember, right, that it never ever stops. So, and it keeps on going round. All right, I'm going to put all those pieces together. Are you ready? Here's my puddle. The sun's about to come out. 1, 2, 3. Evaporation, condensation, precipitation falling down. That's what's called the water cycle, and it keeps on going round. Yeah? Does that work for you? We're going to sing it again, but I want to build our bracelet as we do. So the first thing I have here, if you have these things at home, excellent. If not, you can watch. You can also use maybe some Legos or something else to make a pattern to practice your water cycle. The other thing that you can do is on the back of your graph, you can draw the picture that I put up here. You can draw that on the back of your graph to help you remember what we were talking about today. Now, I have my elastic. I'm going to leave it flat on the table. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a yellow bead for the sun. Because without the sun, we wouldn't have the energy, right, to lift that water and keep it moving. I'm going to slide it right to the middle of my string. And next, evaporation, right? When the sun heats it up, we get evaporation. Can we see that happen? No. Okay, when it turns into gas, we can't see that. Not with our eyes. It's happening all the time when it's sunny out there. We have those puddles, it's happening, and we can't see that. So what we're going to do is use a clear bead for our evaporation. It gets up, we have evaporation. Next step, clouds. Condensation. Now, to represent our clouds with beads, we use a dark blue bead, like those dark storm clouds. So I'm going to put it right next to my clear bead. And then, when those clouds get heavy, what happens? It comes back down. Precipitation falling down. Now, the one we see the most, of course, is rain, or snow, or hail. And unlike evaporation, which we can't see, precipitation we can definitely see. We see the snow, we see the hail, we see the rain. So we're going to use a baby blue. So we have our dark blue bead for the clouds. We're going to put our baby blue bead right next to it. And then all of that rain falls onto the ground. Okay? This is my brown bead for the ground. Some of that rain soaks in for the plants and things like that. All right, so we're going to put that there. And speaking of those plants, I have one more color here that I want to talk about, my green bead. The green bead is for all of the plants that soak the water from the ground and use it in their cells, right, in themselves. So when we do that, we're going to put this on here. We'll make another video, hopefully, about transpiration. Cool thing about plants. I don't know about you, but if you go outside in the summer, especially here in Texas, and we're playing and we're running, guys, we get really hot, right, and sweaty. Plants sweat too. But it's not called sweat. It's called transpiration. They open pores in their leaves. They let the water out so it can go back up and they can bring more food into themselves. So guys, the water also goes up from the tree. That is another reason to have this green bead here. That represents our transpiration. So now what you're going to do, I have all of these steps. I'm going to tie it off. And then I have the water cycle. As I wear this, it helps me remember how all of that water moves. Okay? So we have evaporation, condensation, precipitation falling down. That's what's called the water cycle, and it keeps on going round. So, the water cycle, kind of a big deal. It moves the water. It evaporates it from our oceans where the salt water is. It evaporates it from our freshwater lakes and rivers. Okay, as the water melts from the glaciers and gets added to that pool, it evaporates. And then it rains, right? Does it stay in one spot? So when it evaporates right here, does it stay right there? Not always, okay, because the clouds move, so the rain moves as well. It moves different places. So it's very important for us to be aware of how much water we have and the fact that it moves, okay? In Texas, where we live, we're very prone to drought. And what drought is a period with no water. So when we have big periods, especially in our summer, right, where we don't have a lot of rain, that's a drought. And that's why it gets very important for us to keep an eye on our water and to make sure that we're doing what we can. If we look back at our graph, the whole planet only has one square, guys, 1% fresh water that we all share. So what does that mean? It means we have to take care of it. Okay, even though that water evaporates and it moves around, that doesn't guarantee we'll always have enough. It's up to us to make sure that we take care of that water too. In our last video, we talked about when we brush our teeth. When you brush your teeth, do you leave the water running or do you turn it off? If you'll remember, if you turn it off, I hope you do, or maybe use a cup like we discussed in the last video, you can save 5 gallons of water each time you brush your teeth. Guys, that's 10 gallons a day. If you brush your teeth twice a day, you get 5 gallons in the morning. You save 5 gallons at night. You save 10 gallons every single day. That's over 3,000 gallons a year. And like we said, we would love to hear more ideas. When we brush our teeth is not the only time we use water. If you remember in our last lesson, we talked about how useful it is. We water plants, we give our pets water, we take showers and baths, we wash dishes, we cook. What else could we do to save water? Please send us your ideas. You can send us pictures and drawings on our Facebook page or on our email. We would love to see what you guys are doing. The other thing I want to say is when you learn about water, when you're at home learning, you can get very creative. So what's cool, my nephew and I were learning about the water cycle. And we built this out of Legos. So we have our water here. When the sun comes out, it evaporates. It turns into this nice white cloud. The clouds get darker with the condensation, and this one is ready to rain, right? So it comes down, we have our precipitation. What can you do to show us what you're learning about water at your house? One thing, draw us a picture. Another, we built this one out of Legos that we had at home already, okay? So get creative, tell us what you're doing to learn about fresh water, and don't forget, we do have our book. Underneath this video, at the bottom of all the videos, there is our book, our coloring book here, and inside it has even more ideas about how we can save water, how we can keep it clean, and make sure that we have enough so that we can continue using it. All right? I'm Miss Latimer. Had a great time talking with you guys today. Let us know if you have any questions or want to share what you've been doing at home with us. Thank you so much.